Today we're doing a case that I actually came across on my feed, and it was through Court TV. I actually haven't seen anyone that I follow talk about this case, and it is kind of a smaller case. There's not a ton of information on it or the people that I'm going to be talking about, but I thought it was a very important case, and I think there's a lesson to be learned with this case, so I wanted to bring it up on my channel. This is the case of 16-year-old Logan Kruckenberg-Anderson, who is currently being charged with first-degree intentional murder and hiding a corpse and the alleged murder of his newborn daughter. You heard me right. A 16-year-old murdered his newborn daughter, and no one's really talking about this, and I really think that this is a case that should be talked about because there definitely is a lesson to be had here. This is actually a very recent case that happened in January, so there's not a ton of information on it right now, but maybe after the trial other stuff will come out. But at the moment I'm working with some limited things here, but I still think this is a very important case, so let's get into the details. So this case takes place in Albany, Wisconsin in the beginning of January. I know that the father of the newborn is 16-year-old Logan Kruckenberg-Anderson, but we don't really know any information about the mother of the child other than that she is 14 years old, which makes sense why her identity is being hidden right now. There's been a controversy back and forth on the mother and her involvement in this case, but we'll get to that. On January 5th of 2021, so about 2 months ago as of filming this video, the unnamed 14-year-old gave birth to the baby in the bathtub of her home, and they ended up naming her Harper. So 4 days later, on January 9th at 1:30 a.m., the father of the 14-year-old girl ended up calling the police to report that the baby was missing. The story being that Logan had taken the baby on the 5th and they hadn't seen the baby since. Now don't get me started on this, I'm very confused. If the parents knew that their 14-year-old was pregnant, I feel like that's something you would know. Giving birth is not a quiet thing, so you think that they would have heard her giving birth if they somehow crazily didn't know for 9 months that their daughter was pregnant. But either way, that part is very confusing. There's not really details on it right now, but as far as we know, she had the baby on the 5th. 4 days later, the father calls the police. So Logan was immediately taken into questioning, obviously. In the initial statement that Logan gave the police, he said that him and his girlfriend discussed how they couldn't have the baby in their life, so they discussed getting rid of her by dropping her off somewhere. He then said he placed the baby in his backpack and left. That right there. I'm just a newborn baby in a backpack. So from there, Logan's story goes that he gave little newborn baby Harper to his friend Tyler along with $60 so that Tyler could take baby Harper to an adoption agency in Madison, Wisconsin. And obviously saying that, the police wanted to find this Tyler then, if this is true. Conveniently, Logan had met Tyler on Snapchat, and as soon as he gave Harper to Tyler, Tyler blocked him, so he had like no way to contact Tyler anymore because the only contact he had with him was through Snapchat, because you obviously should give a newborn baby to some stranger you met on Snapchat. This whole story, I just don't understand why he thought that this would be a good alternative story to the truth, but we'll get there. Obviously police want to find this Tyler character, but all Logan can remember is his first name, doesn't remember his last name. He knows for some reason that he lives somewhere called Broadhead or Broadhead, and that he drives a gray Chevy Equinox. Again, I just don't understand why this sounded like a good alternative story to what we'll find out is the truth. I don't know why you'd think telling the police that giving your newborn baby to some stranger that you met on Snapchat that you know nothing about. I know people have made making the excuse that he was young. I personally believe at 16 you know better than that. But I mean, I guess you could give him the benefit of the doubt with this story, like maybe he didn't have a driver's license or a car, like maybe they didn't want to tell their parents, because clearly I don't think the parents knew somehow, because obviously then the parents would have done the right thing hopefully and not had this situation happen. But again, maybe a grain of salt benefit of the doubt that didn't have a vehicle, didn't have any other option, thought, okay, I will have this friend take the baby then because I don't have like the means to. But then my thought process goes to like, well, why wouldn't you go with this person to take your baby there? Why would you just throw this little newborn baby away? There's a lot of cases out there where people hurt their own children, and I don't understand it. But so no way to get hold of Tyler. He took the baby, don't know what happened to him. Because of all this, now not only is the State Division of Criminal Investigation involved, but the freaking FBI is involved. I could just imagine that Logan was shitting his pants at this moment. They decide to interrogate him again because I'm pretty sure they figured out very quickly that this Tyler story sounded really BS. So Logan changes his story and tells the police that on January 5th, he went to his girlfriend's house and she showed him baby Harper. And that's when they decided that they couldn't keep her anymore. I quote, they needed to do something to not have a child in their life. They talked about several options, such as taking her to a fire station or taking her to an adoption agency in Madison. So right off the bat, they're like I was saying before, at 16, you should have the like mental know-how and like whereabouts, especially with the internet and everything nowadays, to not think the best option is to just give your baby to a stranger. If anything, they should have just told their parents, obviously, told an adult. They agreed that Logan was going to drop the baby off somewhere because I want to assume, this is alleged, where my thoughts are going, the 14-year-old clearly doesn't have a car license. She's too young for that. And again, I don't know if Logan did. I'm still trying to understand whose primary idea this was to get rid of the baby. According to Logan and what's been reported, it seems like this was a joint decision. They wanted to get rid of the baby. They didn't want the baby in their lives. They didn't want to have a child. I mean, then they shouldn't have been having sex to begin with. That's a good start. Or using the appropriate protection. And at 16, you should know how to do that, 100%. I guess they could use that excuse that they were too young. But personally, the vibe that I'm getting from this, now I could be wrong, this is just completely my opinion, is this is just seeming to me like that classic boy gets the girl pregnant, the boy doesn't want to be a father, doesn't want to keep it, doesn't want to ruin his like life, he's young, he's only 16, he's having fun, he's a teenager, doesn't want to ruin his fun by having a baby. So he convinced his 14-year-old girlfriend, who I would think is a little less wise in the decision-making department, and I'm sure they were both scared, especially the parents that know they were keeping this huge secret. I know there's so many people out there that have children at 14, 15, 16, like very young, and their brains would never have gone to making this decision. So I think this was a very calculated move. I don't think this was a move that was made because of lack of knowledge, especially since it was admitted that they talked about taking the baby to a fire station or somewhere. So it's also my opinion that you think you're old enough to have sex, you should know the consequences and be prepared to deal with them. Where are the parents in all of this? I don't know. I'm really curious about the living situation for both the 14-year-old and Logan and their like home life and like the backstory on all of this and how this all happened. I'm also really curious if baby Harper was full term or if she was a preemie or what, because I don't know, there's so much information left out that I'm curious about. Anyways, let's get back to the story. So Logan claims that he took baby Harper, this newborn precious little baby, put her in a backpack, which is still crazy to me that he put her in a backpack. I guess he wasn't just gonna walk out with her in his arms. So put this innocent little newborn baby in a backpack and then walked home to his mother's house, which I'd assume is decently close if he's walking there, and then took her out and put her in a bigger backpack. And obviously after all of this, little baby Harper's crying. I don't know how no one would have heard this. I don't know if you've ever heard a newborn baby cry, but they cry very loud. It's kind of piercing. I just don't understand. There's so many holes in this story. It's frustrating. Like how did she give birth and no one knew? And then they took this newborn baby and put it in a backpack, walked down the street with it, put him in another backpack in his mother's home. She didn't hear the baby, maybe she wasn't home. I just don't understand. Someone should have heard that little baby crying. This is where the story gets really sad. Logan says from his mother's house then he decided to walk to a wooded area, and this is like a really remote wooded area. He ended up taking little baby Harper out of this backpack and laying her in this small snow-covered like hole in this fallen tree. This newborn baby was completely naked in the dead of winter in Wisconsin. Like she was crying and screaming for someone to just pick her up and warm her up, and Logan just didn't care. He just took this baby and left her in the snow. But instead of deciding right there and then that he shouldn't be doing this, he could have at that moment decided that this was wrong, picked up baby Harper, warmed her up, took her home. But no, instead he decided to cover her in more snow and just walk away. But then he says that her cries and her screams made him break down and fall to his knees crying because he was just in such an emotional mess at that moment. Like, I don't feel sorry for him, where he pulls out this whole thing about, I fell to my knees crying. Like, do you understand what you were doing? Like, you were crying, knowingly leaving your newborn baby in the woods to die. But don't worry, it gets worse. So Logan tells this to the police and the FBI. They obviously immediately go and try to find baby Harper. You gotta remember, this is Wisconsin, it's January, it's friggin' cold. I really don't think that the police expected, after I think it was like 4 or 5 days of Harper being out in the woods, that she would be found alive. So when the police did go search, it was Sunday, so like I said, about 5 days later from when she was born. They went and looked in the area where Logan said he left her. A Greene County Sheriff's deputy did end up finding baby Harper exactly where Logan said he had left her, inside of this little tree. But she actually had 2 gunshot wounds to her forehead, and there was a bullet casing near her body. Logan ended up admitting to putting her there and shooting her. They ended up also finding the other bullet casing in the backpack that he had carried Harper in. And so obviously he was immediately arrested. And there is a law in Wisconsin that anyone 10 years or older is automatically charged as an adult when they're facing first-degree murder charges. Logan is being charged as an adult as well in this now. Later on, it's not exactly stated when, but another underage child, I want to maybe assume it's a friend of his, ended up giving police a firearm and saying that Logan had gave them this gun on the Friday after the murder. The gun was then tested and it came back as a match to the gun that killed baby Harper. So Logan is now being held on $1 million bond in a juvenile detention center. And let me know your opinion on this. I know everyone's gonna have their own opinion on this, whether he should be charged as an adult or a minor. And his attorney is trying to keep his case in juvenile court. The state is obviously trying to fight that. And the difference between it is, if he is charged as an adult, he could be facing life in prison. But in a juvenile sentencing, the charges are much less. From what I've seen, basically, if he's charged as a juvenile for first-degree murder, he can face up to 9 years in prison, meaning that he'll get out when he's about 25 years old. And if he's sentenced to something like second-degree murder, the max sentence they can give him is about 3 years. So my question for you is, do you think that he deserves to have a lighter sentence considering what he did? Like I said, there's not a whole bunch of information on this, but it seems pretty cut and dry. He is only 16, but at the same time, he is 16, so he should know better. Like, he knew what he was doing when he murdered his daughter, especially when he had the option to take Harper to somewhere safer. Let's talk about that for a moment. I'm sure he didn't know this word for word, but he did allegedly admit to saying that they were talking about taking the baby to like a fire station or something. But there is a law in Wisconsin that up to 72 hours after a baby is born, you can take this baby to, say, like a hospital, a police station, a fire station. I'm sure a church is also a good option. But you can take a baby to like a safe haven and leave it there with no questions asked. No one's gonna ask any questions, so you're not gonna get in trouble. If the whole reason for doing this was he was scared to get in trouble from his parents or something, why not just go take the baby somewhere safe? If he had left her somewhere like a hospital or a church or a police station or something, none of this would have happened. He would be living his life right now. He would be playing football, TikToking, whatever 16-year-old boys do nowadays. He had to know that murdering someone leads you to jail. So like, but what's also crazy to me is that the mother of the child, the 14-year-old, isn't charged with anything at the moment either. Apparently Logan exonerated her and said she had nothing to do with it, but then in some of these statements that I'm hearing, he said that they made the decision together to get rid of the baby. Now, maybe this is all because she didn't know he was gonna go murder the baby. She just thought, you know, my boyfriend that I love is going to take her to the fire station or to an adoption center like he said. That's my only guess on how she isn't being charged in this. She could be very much so innocent in that sense. I just keep going back to, where were the parents? How didn't the parents know that she was giving birth in their home? So fast forward to more recently, in the beginning of February, Logan pled not guilty to first-degree intentional homicide. I read that he's currently being hospitalized because of mental health concerns, but this is not a state-mandated mental health order. And pretty typical, but they're trying to get a psychiatric evaluation done to try to help his case towards moving it back to a juvenile court case instead of an adult court case. I don't know, guys. This one is, like I said, I think this is a case that is very important to tell and for people to be aware of. I think a big lesson to be learned in this case is that there are options out there for everyone, that there is safe options to either leave the child somewhere safe or adopt it out to someone that can give the child a better life. Also, parents, check in on your kids, see what they're doing, what they're up to. There has to be something here that the parents didn't know what was going on. I hope we really find out more details on this case. As I said, let me know down below what your opinion is on how you think Logan should be charged. He did admit to it, so yeah, if you aren't subscribed to my channel, please hit that subscribe button because I post true crime videos every single week, and please give this video a thumbs up. Other than that, I really hope that this 14-year-old girl is getting some help. Definitely probably struggling now, knowing what happened to her child, and I hope all the best for her and her family. Thank you for joining me on this case. If you're still sitting there wanting to see some more true crime videos, definitely go check out the other ones that I have posted. Bye.
Oh,